I was in college when all of this happened, living alone in a tiny off-campus studio that always smelled like instant noodles and dust. The room was basically a bed, a desk, and a mini fridge shoved into the corner, with just enough space left over for me to swivel my chair. Most nights looked the same. Lectures during the day, part-time work in the evening, then cheap dinner and online games until I was too tired to think. That night didn't feel special at all when it started. I remember the low hum of my laptop fan and the constant rattling vibration of the mini fridge behind me. Outside, I could hear the distant traffic on the main road, but inside my room, it was just the soft whir of electronics and the clicking of my mouse. The blinds were half closed, so a thin strip of streetlight cut across the wall like a crooked line. My headphones were around my neck instead of on my ears, because I liked hearing the actual room while I played. It made me feel a little less like I was completely alone, even though I was. I had a cheap office chair that creaked every time I leaned back, and I remember thinking I should really oil it someday. My desk was cluttered with energy drink cans, a half-empty mug, and a notebook full of class notes I knew I wouldn't review. On the screen, my game was already running, the login music looping in the background. I told myself I would play just 1 or 2 matches, then finally go to sleep at a decent hour for once. It was late enough that most of the people I knew were either out drinking or already in bed. For me, though, the night usually started when the rest of the world got quiet. I felt safe in that silence, like nothing could really happen in a place this small and this boring. When I clicked start on that first match, I honestly believed it was going to be just another forgettable night. Looking back now, that's the detail that bothers me the most. How completely normal everything was, right before it stopped being normal. The first strange thing happened so quietly that I almost missed it. I thought I saw something shift in my peripheral vision, just for a second, above the mini fridge. At first, I assumed it was a shadow from a passing car outside. I kept playing, my eyes locked on the screen, my fingers moving on autopilot. Then I saw it again, clearer this time, like a shape separating itself from the darkness. I finally turned my head toward the fridge. On top of it, something was sitting there. Not an object. Not a pile of clothes. A person. Or at least something shaped like one. She looked like a woman, but her edges were soft, like smoke trying to hold a human form. Her knees were pulled toward her chest, and her arms hung loosely at her sides. She wasn't glowing or transparent in a dramatic way. She just looked wrong, like she didn't belong to the room's lighting. For a moment, I seriously convinced myself I was dreaming. I blinked hard and rubbed my eyes with my palm. When I looked again, she was still there. She wasn't looking at me. Her face was turned slightly toward my laptop screen, as if she was watching the game. That was when my mouth went dry. I tried to move and realized my body hadn't gotten the memo yet. My heart was beating fast enough that I could hear it in my ears. Some instinct told me not to speak, not to breathe too loudly, not to do anything at all. I stayed frozen there, staring at her like my eyes were glued in place. The air felt heavy, like the room had been sealed shut without my notice. I slowly lifted my left hand off the keyboard, not to do anything, just to see if I could. For half a second, nothing happened. Then her arm moved. It rose at the same angle mine had, shaky and unsure, like she was feeling gravity for the first time. My pulse spiked so hard my vision blurred around the edges. I lowered my hand. She lowered hers. I leaned forward in my chair, barely an inch. She leaned forward with me, the same inch, the same rhythm. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't a copy after the fact. It was perfectly synchronized. I turned my wrist slowly, rotating it in a small circle in the air. She mirrored every tiny motion, her foggy fingers tracing my shape. A horrible thought crawled into my head. She wasn't watching me. She was watching something through me. I glanced down at the screen. My character was standing still in the game, facing a corridor. I nudged the mouse to the right. The character turned. So did she. In that moment, I understood it wasn't my body she was matching. It was my character. And somehow, my body was the side effect. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Some stupid trick my eyes were playing on me. So I decided to test it properly. I moved my mouse in a tight circle, faster than before. On the screen, my character spun in place. On the fridge, her shoulders turned with the same slow, unnatural arc. Not struggling. Not lagging. Perfect. I lifted my character's weapon and aimed it at the floor on purpose. Her arm lifted too, but her hand was empty, like she was holding something invisible. It looked wrong in a way I can't explain, like her grip assumed a weight that didn't exist. I jumped my character once. She didn't jump. Instead, her heel scraped softly against the fridge surface, like she had tried and failed to remember how. That sound was real. I know it was real because I hadn't moved, and it came from behind me. I swallowed and forced myself to keep testing. I made my character crouch. She bent slightly, her knees cracking like old wood. I made my character turn in a full circle. She followed, and when her face passed my direction, I caught a glimpse of something like a mouth. It wasn't open. It wasn't closed. It was just there. The wrong shape in the wrong place. That was when the fear changed. It wasn't surprise anymore. It was certainty. Whatever she wasn't visiting. She was connected. I was trying to stay calm when my character died for the first time. A burst of gunfire on the screen, a sudden collapse, then the familiar defeat message glowing in the dark. At that exact moment, the weight in the room changed. It felt like a vacuum had opened behind me. I looked over my shoulder without thinking. The top of the mini fridge was empty. No shape. No fog. Nothing but dust and an old cereal box I barely remembered putting there. For a single second, the room felt unsettlingly normal. Then my character respawned. The screen flickered softly as the new life loaded in. And when I glanced back at the fridge, she was there again. Same pose. Same hollow stillness. It was like she had never left at all. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. When my character got shot again, she vanished again. Respawn. Return. Disappear. Return. Each time it happened, it became more precise, more deliberate, less like a glitch. It was as if the game itself was blinking her in and out of existence. I whispered out loud, asking if this was part of the game. My voice sounded small, like it didn't belong in that room anymore. She never acknowledged me. Not once. After the fourth death, I stopped reacting. Not because I was calm, but because my brain felt like it was slipping on ice. I whispered again, louder this time, asking if anyone was there. The room gave me nothing back but the low hum of my laptop. My hands were shaking so hard that I had to plant my elbows against my desk. I didn't want to keep playing, but I didn't know what would happen if I stopped. Some part of me feared that if I froze my character, she might move on her own. I forced my fingers to press the keys again. Every movement felt like I was tightening a rope I couldn't see. When my character ran, she clutched the air as if it were tearing under her grip. When he crouched, her joints bent in slow, brittle angles. It looked painful for her to exist. That thought made me feel sick. I started to cry quietly without realizing it. Tears slid down my nose and dripped onto the desk. My breathing wouldn't slow down no matter how hard I tried. I thought about standing up, about running straight out of the apartment without shoes. But the idea of turning my back on her felt worse than staying. So I stayed in the chair, staring at the only thing in the room that made sense anymore: the screen. I kept playing. Not for fun. Not to win. Just to keep her where she was. Just to keep her from changing. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore. My hands moved on their own, and I slammed the laptop shut. The screen went black so suddenly, it felt like someone had turned off my eyes. The room was darker than I expected without the glow of the game. For a second, there was only silence. No gunfire sounds. No music. No digital life humming in front of me. I waited for her to disappear the way she always did when my character died. She didn't. If anything, she looked clearer in the darkness. The fog that made her edges soft seemed thicker now, closer to real skin than ever before. Then I heard something that had nothing to do with the computer. A quiet dragging sound, like fingernails brushing concrete. It came from behind the mini-fridge. Then it moved. Slowly. Sideways. Along the wall. I followed the sound with my eyes as it crept toward the head of my bed. The air in the room felt heavier with every inch it traveled. I realized it wasn't circling the room. It was coming behind me. And she was no longer sitting on the fridge. I sat there, barely breathing, listening to that sound crawl along the wall. It wasn't loud. That somehow made it worse. It moved with purpose, slow and steady, like it knew exactly where I was. I could feel it more than I could hear it. A vibration in my chest instead of a noise in my ears. The smell in the room shifted into something cold and dusty, like an old basement that had never seen light. My skin prickled, every nerve in my body screaming at me not to move. I tried to tell myself it was an animal on the walls, a rat or something. But rats don't move this carefully. The sound reached the corner near my pillow and stopped. For a moment, nothing happened at all. That silence was unbearable. Then the mattress dipped just slightly, like someone testing the weight of it with one hand. I stared at the blanket, waiting for it to move. It didn't. But the pressure was real. Staying, breathing. My heart felt so loud I was afraid it could hear it. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, hoping I had just imagined it. I hadn't. The bed was still sinking in that same spot. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. It felt sealed shut, like my body had decided silence was safer than sound. I lay there, stiff as a corpse, staring at the faint line of light on the wall. The pressure shifted, slow and careful, like someone adjusting their grip. I could swear I heard fabric brushing against my blanket, though I couldn't see it move. The air above me felt occupied, like there was a shape where there shouldn't be one. I thought about jumping out of bed and running for the door, but the idea of passing through that space made my stomach twist. So I stayed. I listened. And then I felt breath. Not hot. Not cold. Just there. Touching the side of my face without ever really touching it. My eyes burned from refusing to blink. Time stretched so thin it felt like it might snap. Every second passed like it was being dragged through something thick and slow. I don't know how long I lay there like that. Minutes. Years. It all felt the same. The pressure finally lifted, inch by inch. But nothing in that room felt empty anymore. When the pressure finally left the mattress, I didn't feel relief. I felt watched. Not from one place, but from the entire room at once. Like the walls themselves had learned my shape. I could finally move again, but my body didn't seem to believe it. Every muscle stayed tight, waiting for something to grab me back into place. I sat up slowly, expecting to collide with something invisible. Nothing touched me, but the air felt wrong, thick and stale. I reached for my phone on the nightstand with shaking fingers. The screen lit up too bright, like someone shining a spotlight in my eyes. In that harsh glow, my room looked exactly the same as always. My bed, my desk, my fridge, all normal. That terrified me more than if something had been out of place. I aimed the flashlight down the side of the bed. Nothing. Under the desk. Nothing. On top of the fridge. Empty. But the smell was still there. That cold, dusty sharpness in the air. Like something had just left, but not gone far. I whispered her presence into the dark. Not a name, just a question. The room didn't answer. It didn't need to. I stood there with my phone in my hand until my arms started to ache. The light made everything too sharp, like the room had been cut out of paper. I turned in a slow circle, checking every corner, even though I already knew it was pointless. Whatever had been here didn't need to hide. It could leave when it wanted. I lowered myself back onto the edge of the bed, listening for any hint of movement. There was nothing. No wall sounds. No breath. Not even the fridge was rattling anymore. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. The silence felt artificial, like someone had unplugged the world outside my door. I checked my phone for the time and barely recognized the numbers on the screen. It felt unreal that hours could still be moving forward after something like that. I opened my laptop just enough to see the power light. It was still warm. The game was still running, paused exactly where I left it. I closed it again immediately, like it might bite me. I knew then that sleeping was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that invisible weight on the bed again. So I sat there until morning, back against the wall, staring at nothing, waiting for the room to feel like my room again. Morning didn't arrive the way it usually does. It crept in quietly, gray and uncertain, like it was afraid of the room too. When the sun finally touched the wall, nothing disappeared. Nothing changed. I didn't feel safe just because it was light outside. I felt exposed, like everything horrible from the night was still there, just better hidden. I forced myself to stand, even though my legs were numb from not moving. The floor was freezing against my bare feet. I walked through the apartment and touched things just to make sure they were solid. The fridge handle, the door frame, the edge of my desk. They all felt real in a way I hadn't noticed before. I packed a backpack with anything that didn't take time to think about. Clothes, my charger, my wallet. I didn't look at the top of the fridge. I couldn't. Before I left, I unplugged the laptop and shut it inside my bag like I was suffocating it. When I opened the door, the hallway looked too bright, too full of life. It made me feel sick. I locked the door behind me and didn't look back. I didn't go back to that apartment after that day, not even to grab the furniture I paid for. I told the landlord I was breaking the lease for personal reasons, and I didn't argue when he kept the deposit. Money felt meaningless compared to sleeping somewhere that didn't breathe around me. I crashed on friends' couches for a while, pretending my life was just busy. I didn't tell anyone the real reason I wouldn't close my eyes in dark rooms. Whenever a screen turned on, my stomach twisted. Whenever it froze, my heart skipped. I deleted the game on every device I owned, even the old ones I didn't use anymore. I erased the account too, like that might erase whatever had been attached to it. For weeks, every time I lay down, I waited for the bed to sink again. It never did. But I didn't sleep. I just drifted, half awake, listening for a sound that never came. People told me I looked tired. I told them college was doing that to me. It was easier than trying to explain a thing that had no language. Eventually, the fear faded into something quieter, something heavier, like a scar I couldn't see but always felt. I stopped flinching at shadows. I stopped expecting her to be there. But I never forgot the exact shape of that silence. It's been years since that night, and my life looks completely normal now. I wake up, go to work, meet people, and sleep in a bed that feels like a bed. Nothing in my apartment moves on its own. No shapes sit in corners. No walls breathe. If this story had a clean ending, this would be where I tell you something followed me. Or that it came back. Or that I finally understood what it was. None of that happened. Whatever was in that room stayed in that room. It didn't chase me into the world. It didn't leave a mark I could point to. It just stopped. And sometimes I think that's harder to live with than if it had continued. I've tried to explain it in every way that makes sense. Stress, sleep problems, carbon monoxide, my brain filling in blanks that weren't really there. Every explanation works for a few seconds. Then it falls apart in my hands. Because fear like that doesn't feel imaginary when you're inside it. It feels physical. Like weight. Like breath. Like something real enough to leave you, even when it's gone. So no, I can't tell you what it was. I can only tell you that one night in college, my life split into before and after. And the after looks normal, which is the strangest part of all.